are cordially invited to First Presbyterian Church this Sunday, April 6th. It is Matthew Brown Sunday, a time when our Matthew Brown Fellows from W&J College will be leading the worship service. You'll hear from student musicians and speakers, and also hear some reflections from our graduating seniors. We hope you can make it this Sunday to hear from our wonderful student volunteers in the Washington community.
I've been in Matthew Brown, this is my third year. My first 2 years I volunteered at the Humane Society, and now I work as the student supervisor for the fellowship. This year I wasn't out in the field. I love working as a student supervisor, but I definitely do miss working with the community more so, seeing all those cats and dogs, working at the Humane Society. It was a lot of fun, but I'm definitely happy I'm the student supervisor this year. Working with my fellow students is a lot different than working at the Humane Society. It's a lot more planning meetings and coordinating hours, making sure everyone's on top of things, versus at the Humane Society is a little bit more straightforward. I'd go in, make sure that all the cats and dogs are fed, help some people fill out some adoption applications. So it's a lot different, but I like my new job, yeah. I've been able to help my fellow students in a couple of different ways, especially the ones that work at the Humane Society now. I know all the same employees they work with and all the other volunteers that they work with, so I've been especially able to give them some advice, how to, get in more, what jobs they can do there. But also with my other students I supervise, I've definitely been able to get them some cool new opportunities, help them make sure they're on top of everything. It's been going pretty good. Some of the volunteer agencies don't always have as many hour opportunities as our students need. So me and Jenna have to work together to help find them some more volunteering opportunities, or work with their volunteer agency to make sure they get those extra hours, yeah. I'd probably say my most meaningful experience while being in Matthew Brown has been our 2 separate trips to the Mountaineer Food Bank down in West Virginia. This probably isn't news, but West Virginia isn't the most wealthy state in the country. So things like food banks and food pantries are a little bit more common in that state, as we might see here in Pennsylvania or other states. So going there and working at the Mountaineer Food Bank, even just for a few hours the one day, just seeing how much actually goes into, feeding the state and making sure there's enough food to go around. It was really eye-opening, like how backbreaking that work was, lifting all those heavy boxes, sorting through all these cans and boxes of food. It was really interesting to see, what really goes into something like that. Here, most of the students at the college are fortunate enough they don't really have to understand what goes into food banks and food pantries, but going there really changed my perspective, helped me realize how big that problem actually is and how much work actually needs to be done to solve it. Yeah. I think working together in the Matthew Brown Fellowship this year has really changed some of our fellows, especially the ones that have just began this year. You can see very big differences in the way they talk, even just from our monthly meetings. We try to tackle some harder issues in those meetings. So I think that has definitely helped some of our fellows be able to listen and speak a little bit better, tackle some harder issues. And I also think it has really opened up everyone's worldview a little bit more as we go off to all these different places, volunteering, at Turning Point, at the Humane Society, at different food banks, everything. It really helps some of our fellows to get a new worldview and become more confident and, advocate more, I suppose.
My Matthew Brown service project was senior care. That's where I worked. And there I got to go around with patients. I worked under recreational therapists. So I did crafts and games and social activities. My favorite of the social activities that I got to work in was a root beer Sunday, root beer float Sunday. I'm not sure why, but it was really cool that we got to do that, and everyone wanted to come out of their rooms, which was even better because sometimes people just opt out of these activities, but everyone opted into that. I was getting people from their rooms. Most of them cannot walk on their own, so they needed a little bit of help getting into their wheelchairs, or some of them could walk with a little bit of assistance, so I was helping everyone get to the main area where the root beer floats were going to be. Yeah, one of my favorite patients that I got to see, her name was Shirley, and I saw her every Sunday that I went, and I would paint her nails a different color, and that became one of our favorite traditions, and she would always show the nurses whenever she would get a new color, and that was fun. I would hear about her family who came to visit or what was going on with her day while I painted her nails. My most memorable experience with her was during a snowstorm. So I do live very close by to senior care, so just because it was snowing, I could still get there, but her family couldn't get there, so she was telling me how grateful she was that she knew was coming to see her every week, and that was really nice to know that she looked forward to seeing me. I've been involved in various mission projects with Matthew Brown. I went to Miami to help clean up the beach at Biscayne Bay and to serve lunches at the Camilla's house, and I've gone to Sutton, West Virginia to help with the Mountaineer Food Bank, and most recently I went to Philadelphia, and there we were helping with Cradles to Crayons. For me, the most memorable part of the Philadelphia trip was whenever we were at Cradles to Crayons, and we went through pajamas to separate so that they could easily give them out. But I was surprised by how many clothes we had to screen out, and how many clothes that didn't fit certain categories that we had to reorganize. And there's a lot of behind-the-scenes work that went behind all of this donations that I didn't know was there prior. Being a Matthew Brown Fellow has allowed me to see the world from a different perspective, from getting to help so many people who face food insecurity. A lot of times we were serving lunches or packing up boxes to send out to people, and how people have clothing insecurity as well. I had never had to think about that. I've been very lucky in my life, so this gives me I get to open my eyes to see what's happening to other types or groupings of people that will be very important when I'm a practicing physician, because I need to understand way more points of view than just mine.
So through Matthew Brown, I was volunteering at the Concordia Hospice, or the Donnell House, up in Washington. Around there, I kind of did a variety of tasks. It ranged from every week I was there, talking to patients, to doing more like administrative tasks, sending out the letters they send out to their patients, because they not only keep their 10 patients in site, they also have traveling nurses throughout the Washington and West Virginia area. And so it was kind of just, following the doctor around, shadowing him, talking to patients, getting patients rooms stocked, keeping up with the families near them, and just a variety of just kind of helpful tasks. I'm a biochemistry major here at W&J, and so post-grad I'm going to Temple Medicine in Philly. And so for me, wanting to go into oncology kind of long-term, volunteering at hospice has been very, very direct to what I want to do long-term into my major, just because a lot of the people that you see at hospice, and actually everyone you see at hospice, is dealing with some sort of terminal illness, and generally in the present context of the world, it's always almost some form of cancer. And so seeing how patients respond to this, and for some of these patients who it's their second or third cancer that they don't necessarily want to pursue chemo, and learning about medicine in the context of not just really just treatment, but kind of just more caring, has been a really eye-opening experience. So at the hospice, I do sometimes interact with the families. It kind of depends, because I don't have a car on campus. I only volunteer at the site itself, and so generally, if you're in site at hospice, it's considered for more critical care, and so the families will be there kind of most of the day, but very rarely will they kind of want to go on their own to talk to, I guess, me, because they are probably dealing with one of the more critical situations, rather than just visiting someone's home and they are in hospice care, but not necessarily towards the end of hospice care. I actually remember my first patient. She was a really interesting lady. So generally it was in the springtime now, so they have this little backyard through them, and they have all these little sidewalks so patients get out. But for a lot of the patients there, they're not necessarily in walking or moving form. And so this one particular day, one of my patients wanted to go outside, and so the nurses helped me move her into a wheelchair, and they had me with a little sheet to like lift him up and move him over, and I was not expecting to do that when I walked in that day. But we kind of just like walked around in the backyard for about like an hour, and I remember she was telling me about her recent, like she'd gotten really faithful recently. She had met a lot of her family again. Her family had moved back into Washington, and so just kind of hearing like about her life story and like what she had done throughout, and kind of reflecting on, you know, things that we take for granted, like just going for outside. But that was probably my most meaningful patient. She talked to me about like religion, history, everything that you could possibly think about. And she had been a nurse when she was younger, so it was kind of a very nice experience to learn about medicine from her perspective, having gone through it and been done with it. So I think for my career, I think before I started working at hospice, my view of medicine was kind of very narrow. Obviously, you see all these TV shows and like you see a doctor around, and it's very much just like patient treatment. They're fixed, they're out. And so like kind of like being in this environment where it's not necessarily about just like fixing them, I guess, per se, or treating them or making them better, and more so thinking about just making them feel good and just feel pleasant and feel cared for, was a kind of very different form of care that I never really would have expected within medicine. And so understanding that like as a doctor, you know, the best course of action isn't always just like treat. It's more looking out for the person that you're treating with, making connection with them, and understanding that the best course might not always be like if you do cancer chemo, or a very radical course of treatment. In some cases it might just be, you know, sit down, enjoy, and just like kind of have a peaceful end of life.
The Old Testament lesson is Psalm 126. Listen for God's word for you. It will be like a dream when the Lord comes back with the captives of Zion. We will laugh and sing happy songs. Then the other nations will say, the Lord did a great thing for Zion. Yes, we will be happy because the Lord did a great thing for us. So Lord, bring back the good times, like a desert stream filled again with flowing water. Then those who were sad when they planted will be happy when they gather the harvest. Those who cried as they carried the seeds will be happy when they bring the crops. The witness to God's word, thanks be to God.
So for any students that are thinking of being Matthew Brown Fellows, I'd say absolutely go for it. It's probably one of the most special things I've done throughout my college time here. It's so much fun. You get so many great new experiences. It's very difficult to get this level of like volunteer experience and community service and everything on your own. It's very rewarding to work in like a group like this, where you're surrounded with a whole bunch of other people who are doing these volunteering opportunities, and go to these fellowship meetings. It really adds a lot. Like it goes a lot further than just volunteering. It adds a lot to your resume and just your experiences in general in college.
If I had to give advice to future or prospective Matthew Brown Fellows, I would say get involved as much as you can. The fellow that recruited me, he told me just to get involved everywhere I could. Even if I didn't know everyone, I would get to know them. It's not the barrier to be worrying about. The barrier would be, how can I do the most good? And this is an awesome organization to do the most good with.
So for students considering the Matthew Brown Fellowship, I think I definitely, from my perspective, just say be open to it. Whenever I applied, actually applied because I wanted to work at Washington Hospital. And I mean, in our class, there's already 2 or 3 other people working there. And I had put the Donnell House as my second choice because it looked interesting. And I remember in my interview, Jenna told me that, you know, nobody really ever has gone there. And so I was a little bit scared, like going in that first week. I didn't have like a set duty. I didn't have a set, like someone to ask about what they did there. And so I think just like keeping an open mind and like being willing to trying something new. And then obviously like ready to adapt and try something new. And so for me, whether it was like having to walk there or throughout the days whenever Roxanne, who's the volunteer coordinator at the Donnell House, would some days, like I remember I went to a high school once to talk with them because she was going there to talk about her career, and all of a sudden I was too. And so just kind of like being ready to do whatever comes at you, it was been probably my most important piece of advice.